And we'll begin here with Monique.
As you're talking about weakness, I think that's anyway, it was actually perfect for this week. But I was thinking about the scripture.
So this week was good for talking about weakness? Okay, that was.
Yes, 100%. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verses 9 through 10. So Rav Shaul, would it be correct to think about what he is saying in this way? That his actual weakness was pride, and so he received a different type of a weakness to help him overcome the other or to battle that, and how that works maybe in our life.
Okay, so let me read what he said there in the verse. It says, therefore I take pleasure in weaknesses, in insults, in needs, and persecutions, and distresses for the sake of Messiah. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Okay, now, he's wording this in a very specific way. So I think we got to be careful how we take it, meaning it could go more than one way. First of all, this fits into the theme that we find in Scripture of when you suffer for his sake. So that's the way he says this, for the sake of Messiah. When I take pleasure in weaknesses, meaning weaknesses of others attacking me. Insults, needs, persecutions, distresses, these things that they're attacking me with, okay, thinking I'm weak. He says, but when I'm weak, or they think I'm weak, I'm strong. These things strengthen me. But he's saying he's doing this for the sake of Messiah, okay? And so he's telling you, when you have these moments where you could be weak, where people think you're weak, and they attack you, and they beat on you, and they create distress for you, and they persecute you, in those weaknesses, you find out that you have strength. Because you appear weak, but you really have strength. Does that make sense?
So I hear what you're saying with that, but I think the context, like when I was looking before, he was talking about a story about how he had, so like verse 7, I think and above, he was talking about a story of someone who had ascended to whatever place, and it says, like in verse 7, it says, and to keep me from exalting myself because the exceeding greatness of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to hit me, to keep me from exalting myself. And I think that's more of where I was trying to connect.
I said there's more than one way to go with this. First of all, if Satan is mentioned, we're going to cover these verses. So I know you guys, this one I'm okay with. Please be patient with bringing up verses we didn't go to yet. In this case, because you're pointing out the whole idea of weaknesses, which is what I did bring up, so I'm glad you brought that out. I'm sure I will cover this to whatever degree. I looked at my notes to see, and my notes only goes to 1 Corinthians. I don't have the rest of my notes that goes into 2 and keeps going all the way to Revelation. But I guarantee you the word Satan's in there, it's in my notes. Okay, so we're going to cover verses that have Satan or devil in them. All right, but your point being this. He says, look, and to keep me from exalting myself because of the exceeding greatness of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me. That's verse 7. Concerning this, I pleaded with the master 3 times to take it away. He says, my favorite is sufficient for you. Okay, now that's saying this thing is causing me a pain. It's not saying a weakness, all right? He said, what I give you is sufficient, all right? But then we go into this, therefore I take pleasure in weaknesses. In other words, things that, are not perfect, that are not strong in me, like this thorn in the flesh. Maybe it was a physical ailment that affected how he walked or how he did something, whatever. What he's saying is, in the context, he goes, I take pleasure in weaknesses, in insults, needs, and persecutions. Now we're in a whole different place than we were in the one that's a thorn in the flesh. Unless he's talking about people that are attacking him and these things are thorns in the flesh, okay? He says, though, in distress, etc., for the sake of Messiah. So now we're saying if you suffer for the sake of Messiah, you should take pleasure in that and count it joy when you suffer for his sake. And there are other verses that, Paul uses that same concept, the idea of suffering for the sake of Messiah. So I think that's what makes it a little bit different than when you go to the earlier verses when he's talking about this thorn in the flesh. So he's expanding it a little bit more into this idea of something for the sake of Messiah. Okay?
Yeah, so then do you think that because I know that sometimes in our weaknesses, it's like we will sometimes accept those things and not try to fight as hard against, because it's almost like we'll accept it, like using those scriptures like in Messiah, I'm weak, but in him I am strong.
Look, I think in Paul's case, for example, weakness as I'm using it is something that is an area of potential temptation and sin and going off in the wrong direction, okay? Paul's not using it that way. He's saying, lest I become cocky, okay, he gave me something to keep me humble. This thorn in the flesh to keep me humble, whatever that is. And that's a different thing than an area of weakness, like that would be something that might tempt you in. You understand what I'm saying? It's just a different thing, okay? Because Paul, it wasn't a weakness. If anything, the weakness would have been his ego, okay? Because that's what he said was being addressed by this thorn, his idea of like, to keep me from exalting myself, verse 7, right? So that could have been the weakness that could have been exploited. He said, he gave me this thorn. Maybe that thorn is to having people constantly tell him how much they don't like him and how much he think he's, look, you know, I really don't have, I know people think I do, it doesn't matter. You can ask Elder and Rabbi Talmud, I don't have that ego thing. I don't walk around strutting around thinking I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. But just in case you're worried about that, I got plenty of people telling me I'm not every day. Okay, so I have plenty of those thorns in the flesh, in the chat right now and everywhere else, you know, telling me how much I'm not that, okay? But I don't know what this thing is that Paul was talking about. But he may have been just thinking that everything is so great and everything's so perfect, and Abba maybe gave him, you know, arthritis or something, to a certain type of pain that would constantly remind him, you know what, you're still flesh. You still have issues. You're not perfect, okay? So this thorn in the flesh may have actually been a thorn in the flesh. It also could have been others outside constantly creating a pain for him, because thorn in the flesh sounds like something painful. But then he says, look, insults, needs, persecutions, these are all the things that he was facing all the time. Maybe those are meant to be that thorn in the flesh, like he was constantly being attacked, persecuted. You know, how many times was he, you know, flogged, drowned, and everything else that happened to him, right? Shipwrecked. Well, these are things that maybe to help deal with his pride issues. But they were for the sake of Messiah. He counted it a pleasure. I'm not upset about these things. I recognize there's a purpose to them, right? Okay, but this isn't weakness the way I was describing it. The weakness that, if anything, the only thing that would be a weakness that I was describing would have been the ego problem in the beginning of verse 7, okay? All right. And so to help keep him humble, Abba gave him a thorn, something that was constantly poking at him, okay?
I saw on the temptation of Yeshua an interesting angle that in Mark. So in Mark chapter 1, verse 10, this is him being immersed. And
Right.
immediately coming up from the water, he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit coming down on him like a dove. And a voice came out of the heavens, "You are my Son, the beloved, in whom I did delight." And up to this point, you know, like a Pentecostal will be like, oh, this is exciting. This is like, I'm getting the Spirit. This is, everything is going on in my life. It's such a blessing. But then the very next verse, it's like, and immediately the Spirit drove him into the wilderness. And that word drove is like the same with when Yeshua drove out the money changers. It can have different levels of strength to it.
Right.
But I noticed it's not like the devil that's actually driving him into the wilderness. The devil does take him up to the temple, and it takes him up to places later. But initially it was the Spirit. It was, Yahweh really taking him there. So I really found that was interesting. And then in verse 13, and he was there in the wilderness 40 days, tried by Satan, and was with the wild beasts. So like back in those days, that would be a really dangerous kind of thing to happen. I was looking in Ezekiel where it talks about beasts and such in 29 verse 5 and a prophecy of Ezekiel. And I shall leave you in the wilderness, you and all the fish of your rivers. On the face of the field you shall fall, and you shall not be picked up or gathered. I shall give you as food to the beasts of the field and to the birds of the heavens. And there's lions and all sorts of the creatures out there. And it's just crazy that the Spirit, right, is the one doing this initially to him right after he got the Spirit coming down on him like a dove. Like a dove is the one driving him into the wilderness, into these wild animals and having them fast. It's like, yeah, like right after you get mikvahed and you're all like, okay, I'm in this walk. It's like all of a sudden you're way like danger area of life.
Well, I mean, I usually tell everybody, I said, look, coming out of the water is one of the greatest moments you'll ever have, but it also is, as a reminder, you basically painted a giant bullseye on yourself, inviting testing, okay? And you shouldn't be afraid of that because, you just did something, basically made this big declaration in public. I made my declarations, I'm committed to these things. Well, now the testing will begin. Did you mean what you said? It's as simple as that.
The other thing I had was, I was thinking about when you're talking about buttons as like getting rid of the buttons, but also like if you had like some sort of computer or that had some virus or something wrong with it, a lot of times you don't know why the computer's acting slow or, it has these weird things. But if you install a button, let's say like HaSatan, that can get clicked on your keyboard or something else, you can say, oh, okay. So when I click this button, I can follow, I don't know if there's a wire or something you can trace it back to the actual issue and root that out, and then the button won't make any difference because you got what expressing.
Right. I understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
But that's essentially when people come in to deal with their buttons that have already been pushed. One of the things that we do is we try to dig out what was underneath, what was the actual real issue. Because often what comes up on the surface is not the actual issue. It's a symptom of the issue, right? And so we have to kind of dig underneath, and so we do that on a regular basis.
So you were giving some examples of some things which I love, like you encounter in your life. And at some point you were talking about using your words, right? And going back to Caroline Leaf, like I mentioned her yesterday, but she would always say words of life, words of death, right? So
she would say what?
Words of life versus words of death.
Oh, words of life versus
yes.
death. Okay.
So like I was thinking, whenever we're tempted, it's obviously something, like you said, a weakness in our lives, right? And I started writing my weak areas when you were teaching. Is it okay? Because that's what we used to be taught when we were in Christianity to, like Yeshua did, right? Like, for instance, saying, well, the fruit of the Spirit is patience, if I'm being impatient, or I'm supposed to forgive this person because otherwise my Father will not forgive me, or things like that, right? Like things that, or I can do all things through Yeshua who strengthened me. Like what Monique was saying. Is that something that, like I don't do that anymore because that's what I always was taught, but I see how that could be a good thing to do. So that came to mind. What do you think about that?
Well, now look, you got to do whatever you got to do to remind yourself what the realities are, okay? I mean, saying I can do all things through Yeshua is a complete useless thing to do if you don't believe it, okay? So using things that will remind you of reality, that's a reality. Reality is you could do all things through Yeshua who strengthens you. But it's not a reality if you don't believe it. Well, it's not your reality. It is reality, but it's not your reality. You're not participating in that aspect of reality. Okay, so it really has to do with how do you buy into it? How much have you bought into whatever it is that you're... So words are just useless words unless you actually believe the words, okay? Okay, now some of you, this is gonna sound a little weird, but faking it till you make it is actually a thing. So if you're gonna say words that you don't fully believe, but you know that they're right and they're true, then put yourself in a mindset of asking the question, if I really believe this, how would that feel? If I really counted on it, how would that feel? And then say the words in that state, okay? In other words, if you knew that was true, how would you sound saying that? What would it feel like saying that? Put yourself there even though you're not there, okay? This is stuff we do with people in terms of personal development when we have you write out a description of future you, the way you'd like yourself to be if you kind of overcame all kinds of things and developed what you wanted to develop, like who you'd be in 5 or 10 years. But some of it's, a good chunk of it's not true yet. That's why you write it down, because it's stuff that isn't true yet. And you're supposed to read that to yourself every day. Well, it's hard to read it and mean it if you don't believe it yet. So I teach people, put yourself in the state of, well, if it were true, how would it feel if that was actually true? Say it as if it's already true, but you got to get yourself emotionally, because the vibrational resonance works a lot stronger when it's emotion behind it, okay? So if you don't believe it, put yourself in a state that you would be in if you believed it. Because then you're still saying it in a place of belief. If I believed it, what would that sound like? How would I feel saying that? What would that be like? And say it from that perspective, okay?
Thank you. That's good. Very good. With Yeshua being tempted 3 times, obviously we're not him. So as long as we're not learning the lesson, we're going to just literally be tempted in that area over and over and over, right? Are the temptations or the trials going to start getting worse and worse? Is that how it operates in our lives, like whenever we are not learning a lesson?
Yeah, I mean, I think it fits sort of in the model of the curse you 7 times more, curse you 7 times more. I think there's an escalation. If you're not obeying or you're not listening to whatever he's trying to get your attention on, whatever blew up to get your attention in the first place, but you're still ignoring it, you're likely to blow up worse the next time, and then likely to blow up worse the next time, the more you ignore him as he's trying to allow these things to play out to get your attention. I mean, all these things are being allowed or caused to get your attention. Like Yeshua, like Yahweh says in the Tanakh when he says, and if you are not instructed by these curses, I will curse you 7 times more. So in one of those places it says, if you're not instructed. So all these things are meant to be instructional. But there's a precedence being set of escalation. So the more you ignore, the more it would likely escalate, okay? Now, that's only up to a point. If you've ignored something beyond a certain point where escalation doesn't seem to work, he might not escalate it anymore. As a matter of fact, he might like you totally get away with it because you already moved yourself in a different direction. So that's where we see people doing stuff and it looks like they're getting away with certain things because they've already proven themselves not to be reachable in that area at the moment. So he's like, fine, you want to do that, go do it. Does that make any sense? So I don't want you to keep thinking that until you listen, he's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse with it. At some point, he's going to realize you just don't want to listen. Okay, so I'll leave you alone. But you're not ending up where you want to end up at this point, but I'll just leave you alone until you're ready to listen. So when things seem to be getting less problematic, I was going to say seem to be getting better, but like you're having less cursing coming with whatever the behavior is, don't think, well, then he's okay with it. No, he's just giving up on you in that area. He's like, you're not ready to listen to me. Do whatever you want to do, all right? We all do that sometimes with our children or whatever. So somebody's like, you know what, just go do what you want to do. You're going to do it anyway. I'm not punishing you anymore. I don't care. At some point, it's going to blow up in your face to the point where you realize, I need to do something. On some level, you're going to just realize what you're doing isn't working. It might not be terribly bigger, cursing, escalating. Just be like, at some point, you'll be like, man, my life isn't going where it needs to go. I wonder why. Oh, because I'm not listening, okay?
When you were saying, you're talking about HaSatan and how he knows the scripture and he also knows us, knows everything about us. Proactively speaking, right? But we always talk about that, you know, like working on yourself. Working on ourselves will also involve looking at, okay, so what are the deep things there that I'm ignoring, right? What can I do about it? So then we're not having those, working on the strength so that we don't have the weak spots for him to use that to keep, you know, tempting us. And I have my list of things. I need to go to talk to you really because I have to see what's behind that, and I'm not clear on that part.
All right, we can dig that out. Okay, let me just say this, okay?
Thank you.
When it comes to this HaSatan mindset, I want to switch it a little bit. You're thinking like him, because you said you quoted me how I said, you know, he knows the scriptures and everything. There's verses that say that Satan and the demons know these things are true about Yeshua, you know, and so if they tremble and fear, so to speak, why wouldn't you, or whatever. But the thing is, they don't really tremble and fear like they should, because they're in a thing called delusion, all right? Which means that they've convinced themselves, even though they know all the verses, somehow they convince themselves somehow it's not going to play out to them the way it says. And you guys do the same thing sometimes, and that's when you have a Satan mindset. Somehow you convince yourself that you know what it says, and you know what you're supposed to do, you know what you're not supposed to do, and you know that if you do that correctly, you end up where you know, in the kingdom, etc. But somehow you've convinced yourself that I can do this, which is not what he said, and still end up there. Even though you know he said that that's not the case. And that's when we actually start thinking like Satan. Satan knows what it says is going to happen to him, the demon, everything, right? He knows. But he's got this delusion that somehow he can derail it, he can alter it, something will go whatever to change it into his favor. And we think that about ourselves too at times, and that's thinking like him. That's when you're thinking like him. That's something he planted in you. This is you choosing a mindset that actually matches his mindset. He knows all the things that are going to happen, etc., what's right and wrong, but he chooses not to because he's convinced himself that he's going to get away with it. Somehow he's convinced himself the consequences aren't coming. And we do that. And when you do that, you're thinking like him. Okay? That's why he says you're like your father, the devil, who's a father of lies. You've lied to yourself. That somehow the consequence is not coming the way it says.
You know, when you really take all this, it gets deep because, you know, we're trying to sort out the devil, HaSatan, versus Satan.
Look, I'm probably the first person to teach this concept, not this concept, teach about the devil, didn't use it to scare you. Right? Any pastor ever taught about the devil used it to try to scare you. Okay? I'm trying to wake you up. I'm not trying to scare you by telling you how it really works. But I'm the first one that's not using this to try to scare you. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think that's good. And I want to sort of add to that on the light side of just what you read in Luke 4, that very first verse, 4:1. And Yahweh, being filled with the set-apart spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. So that, because I had made a note earlier about when you said, when you level up to the next level, you're going to be tested to see if you belong in that level.
Right.
Well, it's very appropriate spiritually to be filled with a set-apart spirit. And we feel that we've reached a level that we have that internal feeling of being filled with a set-apart spirit. It's right then that we should expect to be tested.
Absolutely.
Right. But in our case, it wouldn't be by HaSatan. It would be more like what you're trying to explain, maybe that doubt of our own conscience.
It could be HaSatan. HaSatan could still be the one sitting there pushing on those weak spots. Okay? Or somebody being used in that role.
Or somebody being used in that role.
Okay.
All right. So that does bring, I'm glad you brought that up because that took me to what my real question would be. In our Parsha study, the Parsha for this week, Deuteronomy 13, verse 6, when your brother and your son or your mother or your son of your daughter or the wife of your bosom, your friend, who is at your own being entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other mighty ones. That's chapter 13, verse 6.
Right.
Is that a precursor? Is that a foreshadow of how?
No, it just shows you how anybody could be working in that role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it just shows you it could be your mother, your sister, your brother, it could be anybody who, if they're leading you away from Yahweh, Torah, truth, and covenant, they're in that role. They're creating a stumbling, a blockage to what you're ultimately trying to get to. Okay?
Well, and in this case, you know, when it was for going into here that person is supposed to be identified and actually stoned and killed.
Yeah.
Now we obviously don't do that today, but does that mean that this is so serious in the eye of Yahweh? This is a serious situation.
Yes.
And we should take it seriously.
Yes. And by the way, just for all of you people out there, I'll get to this thing that's important. I want to quote something else also, but he said, well, we don't do that today. You need to know why we don't stone people today, okay? Because marijuana is legal and everybody's stoned already. No, so, sorry, I could not, I couldn't resist. Everybody must get. That's Bob Dylan. Okay, some of you guys are too young for that one. All right, so look, to stone people required, as all legal things require, they require certain parameters. You need to have a jurisdiction. The law takes place and covers a location. Okay, so they have to really, to stone anybody, you have to be in the land as a cohesive nation with a government, with a judicial system, then you can stone people. Okay? So it's not that that law was done away with, it just cannot be applied where we are today. Because I know people say, oh, well, you say that the law says this or that, how come you don't stone people? I'm like, because it would be breaking the Torah to do it. Because the Torah says you can't just do these things without these other things in place, okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to address is, and we're gonna get to this maybe next week or the week after, but in Matthew 16, Yeshua turns to Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. He now just called Peter Satan. So again, somebody could be acting in that role, not that Peter all of a sudden for a moment was possessed by the actual devil himself or whatever. But he was saying something that was acting in the role of adversary. You're getting in the way of what I'm doing. And all he did was say, oh, master, be kind to yourself. Don't say those things. He's trying to be nice. He said, oh, no. You're talking against what has to happen, right? So he literally called him Satan. Okay, that's a big deal. We're going to get to that in a week or two, depending on how fast I go through the verses. But that's coming up in Matthew 16. What I'm just saying is what you were talking about, that's kind of an example. Okay, when you said Deuteronomy 13, it could be your mother, you said, well, here it's Peter with Yeshua. And Peter is the Satan at the moment. The role, the thing that he's doing is a Satan behavior, okay? Not that he was all of a sudden no longer part of the discipleship and everything else. He had a moment where his thought process and his mindset was in line with what an adversary would be doing. He's getting in the way of and being an adversary to what Yeshua said had to happen. Yeshua literally just said, they're gonna kill me, or whatever he said, and Peter's like, oh, no. Okay? Don't say that. I just said it's gonna happen. Then it's gonna happen, Okay?
So, good. So then we need to be, I guess, to make my point again, we need to be very discerning and to take this seriously when we identify either a person that's being an enticer, something that's in our consciousness that's kind of talking us out of our path, our walk.
Or into a wrong path.
Or into a wrong path. Right. Those are all
things to be
serious
highly
concerns. They're just serious concerns.
Look,
okay.
If you were going to analyze this, and maybe this will be something we'll do when we go through the entire book dealing with people and looking at people. So one should be asking the question, Peter should be asking the question, Kepha, what did I just do that was a Satan move? What was driving that? What was driving is he didn't want what Yeshua said would happen to happen. He's like, no, don't say that. Don't say they're going to kill you and everything else. Okay, this is 16:23. So let me just see what it says here, okay? So from that time in verse 21, Yeshua began to show his taught ones that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, suffer much from the elders and the chief priests, be killed, and be raised again on the third day. And Kepha took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, be kind to yourself, master, this shall not happen to you. So what was the Satan moment? He decided that he knew better because he didn't like what Yeshua said. He didn't want it to happen. Some of you do that, by the way, women to your husbands. They make a decision and you turn into Satan because you say, oh, no. And the husband said, no, but we have to do that or we're not gonna do this. Oh, what I wanna do. Okay, we become that adversarial stumbling block, obstruction to whatever was said has to happen. We can't afford to buy that now. And you go, blah, blah, blah. He said, but I said we can't afford it. Okay? Whatever it is, we do this in relationships. And in that moment, you didn't get possessed by some outside thing. Your behavior, your mindset matches a Satan mindset. Do you understand what I'm saying now? So Peter didn't all of a sudden change from being in line with the Father to being in line with Satan. He just didn't want it to happen. And he started being selfish. All he cared about was himself at that moment, which of course we think about the devil as being the ultimate in selfish. Okay, we didn't cover that anywhere yet, but I'm just saying it's something we've always seen that, okay? And so Yeshua had to say, get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, adversary. Get behind me. Don't go again. I said it was necessary. I know you don't like it. It's like when Peter doesn't stop. Same thing happens at the supper, right? When he goes, I got to wash your feet. And Peter's like, oh, no, don't wash my feet. When you don't understand something, keep your mouth shut or ask a question. Don't just jump in, But you'll do that. A lot of you will do that. I don't agree or I don't understand it. I'm just going to run my mouth. Quiet is better. Or ask a question, okay? Of course, then Peter makes it even dumber when he goes, he's so blue. Don't wash my feet. Oh, no, I need to have my feet washed or I'm not a party. Good, wash everything. Here, dump the water over my head. Wash me head to toe. And Yeshua's just like, you are so blue. Okay. Listen. By the way, that's why he doesn't run things in Jerusalem. The red James does, okay? All right? Okay, Peter the blue does not run things. James the red does, okay? So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, it would have been a real mess in Jerusalem, okay?
I want to thank you for this teaching. I mean, it has really clarified, taken the boogeyman out of the mix, and I'm the boogeyman. I see this as that still small voice in my head will say, do this or that. And then Satan second guesses it in my mind. Say, wait a minute.
No, you second guess it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right. And then he cheers
there ain't
you
no
on.
more boogeyman. The red tail and horns and...
I have said this before, I will say it again here. Okay, we talk about things like the still small voice. Mm-hmm. I've often told you got at least 3 voices in your head. I'm not saying you're crazy, this and that. I'm saying, but you have you, I want, I don't want. Your preferences, that's your voice. I like this, I don't like it. I want to do this, I don't want to do this, right? That's all your voice. The still small voice, we know that's the Creator's voice. And it's quietly waiting for the rest of the voices to shut up so you'll listen, okay? The other voice is this voice that's HaSatan's voice. And that voice is in line with your voice when your voice is not in line with Yah's voice. He's the one saying, yeah, let's go, let's do it. Or, hey, you don't want to do that? Let's not do it. You don't want to do it. It's your voice, though. All he's doing is teaming up with you as your wingman, to encourage you to do what you want or not do what you don't want to do and ignore whatever the small voice is saying, the still small, quiet voice is saying. But that voice is not initiating anything. It's just cheering on what you already wanted, okay? Yah said A, and you're like, I don't really want to do that. And so the small other voice says, yeah, let's not do it. You don't need to do that. Nobody gets to tell you what to do. And the other voice is like, oh no, but it's important for you not to do this, okay? Or for you to do this, whichever way, whatever it is that you're arguing about, okay? You really want to do something, but God said no. So the other voice is saying, well, come on, let's do it. It's kind of like at the tree. Well, it looks like the fruit is good for this and that and everything else. The voice had said, God's voice had said, don't touch it, don't eat it, okay? I believe she wanted to eat it. Satan knew she wanted to eat it, and so they got to play the little game play out because she wanted to eat it, okay? I don't think the idea came from him, So I'm just throwing that out there. So when you're saying that, yes, you do have those voices. But I just really need to hit this so hard. I don't believe, you don't want to listen to that, fine, go somewhere else, whatever. I don't believe he initiates anything that didn't already come out of you, okay? He is not the root of the cause. Stop saying the devil made you do it. All right, remember that was subtitled, Did the Devil Make You Do It? No, okay? Did he encourage you to do it? Oh yeah. Okay? Did he cheer you on, support you, encourage you? Absolutely. The thought came from you. The weakness was in you. The temptation was in you. Okay? He just brought it out. Okay? And so when he's going around the earth searching for whatever, like in Job, okay, he looked at Job. Job had nothing to work with. It's not like it says, well, I tried him and tested him and he just won all the battles. There was nothing to work with. Okay? And so he says, well, you spoil it. Fine. So take everything away, see if there's something to work with. Still was nothing to work with. Because Job was a righteous man. But the rest of us, not so righteous. Plenty to work with. Some of us more than others, okay? But there can be plenty to work with. And so let's just be careful and understand that you got to look in the mirror first. Oh, yeah, Satan has a role, but only if you let him. Only if you open up to give him ground to work with, okay? You know, it'd be like, I'm a carpenter, all right? But I can't do anything unless you give me the wood, the nails, the hammer, and the things that I need to work with, okay? So unless you give that to me, I can't build anything. But you're handing Satan all the stuff he needs. I got all the stuff to work with. Go ahead, mess with me, okay? But it comes from you. The initiator of the process, the initial causality is you. All right.
And thank you for distinguishing that.
Right.
A question. In the 09 ISR
Right.
and the new copies in 2:9 where it says, curse your God and die,
Right.
the wife said. In the later version, it says, bless your God and die. So I took it back to Strong's, and the word is barak.
All right, so it would be bless.
And but it has both a connotation of good, depending, I guess, how you use it, or the negative.
Right.
It has,
Well, and again, the way she used it in the phrase was all like, bless your God, like whatever. You do that and die. Okay, your God's so good, go ahead, you bless him and die. So it was still the same point. You know what I'm saying? Fine, you want to go bless your God? Good, go bless him and die.
So just like Mr. Bohe, your teaching has caused me to reevaluate my whole preconceived notion of Satan, good and evil, that kind of clearly delineated line between the two. And what I was struggling with, and you brought it up, was the father of lies. But what I'm seeing so far in your teaching, nothing he has said, nothing Satan or HaSatan has said has been a lie. Nothing. And I go back to Genesis 3, where he asked Hava, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman replies, we are to eat the fruit of the trees, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim said, do not eat of it, nor touch it. Well, Elohim never said don't touch it. That's something she added.
Right.
And then the Nahash says, you shall certainly not die. Well, that was true, because her thinking was, if I touch it, I die. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. And so she then looks and sees the tree's pretty, it's good food, all that stuff. She thinks what's right in her own eyes. She gives into her own fleshly wants.
Yes.
Takes the fruit and touches it. And when she touches it and does not die, that's doubt. So what he has told her is the truth. And so she has now taken a truth that is outside of Torah, made that choice, rather than following what God had told her to do. And I think that's where we get into trouble, is deciding which truth we want to follow.
But also, it also comes, go ahead, finish.
Well, and I use it as an example that David. The truth for David was that Bathsheba was hot. You know, he wanted some of that. And he's thinking, that, man, I could get, man.
You sound like your rabbi now.
Well, I've been following you a long time. So I think that was the truth for him. And so he chose to pursue that truth rather than the truth of following Torah.
Yeah.
And I think it's when we make those choices where we have some incentive from the adversary to go that direction that we get into trouble. It's which truth we choose to follow.
Okay, but also, I love the way you put this, so I could take both the Genesis and the David stories. Okay, so there's the immediate realities and there's the ultimate realities. Okay, what I mean by that is, in the immediate reality, David knew he was king. he can make this work. Okay, he can go ahead and get her husband killed. He was the king. He could pretty much make anything happen. That was an immediate reality. He wasn't thinking about the longer term ultimate realities, okay, of what the consequences might be. Same thing with Chava. Now we could go with the do not touch and she touched it, maybe okay. We also can go with the fact that when he said you'll die, you can look at it as the immediate reality of that moment, you bite of it and you drop dead. Well, I don't think that Yah meant any of that. Okay? That death was not a part of their makeup until that happened, and then death became a part of their makeup afterwards. But again, we have a challenge knowing how to balance immediate realities with ultimate realities. Okay? So we read a lot of verses, people say, oh, well, like when Yeshua said, there will be those in that generation that will not die before all these things play out, and a lot of people thought it was that first generation in that first century. And then when it didn't happen, that was an immediate reality that didn't play out. And then we would have to look at it as an ultimate reality, okay, of how that would actually explain how it played out. So Satan did not lie in terms of immediate reality. If you eat this fruit, you're not going to just drop dead. So from that point of view, now he didn't tell the truth though. It was a partial truth because he knew what Yah meant. It said your eyes should be open. That was true. I mean, a lot of things he did say were true. What I'm saying is when he said you certainly will not die, if he was only addressing the immediate reality, he was telling the truth. If he was talking about the ultimate reality, he was not. Okay? So he's very clever. And that's what happens often in our lives as well. So you guys understand, okay? We must deal with the fact that there is reality in the moment, and then there's ultimately what was being said, what the actual reality is. Because in the moment, you might think, well, nothing bad's gonna happen. I can get away with this. This will be fine. I am in a situation where I can handle all this. And in the ultimate reality, but it will be a problem, okay? So David certainly could have been thinking, I'm the king. If I want her, I can have her. Oh, she got a husband? We can fix that, right? Okay? And so that was his immediate reality. And he was right. He was able to do all of those things. But ultimately, what he did was wrong, and the bigger picture reality played out as well, right? So you gotta watch out that your immediate realities are in line with and match up with the bigger reality. Because if they don't line up, the bigger one wins, ultimately, right?
This teaching is extremely triggering for me. You were saying that if we're in a state of weakness, that's when he comes in. And nothing will put you in a state of weakness constant than having lost a child. Last week you also said, how has God empowered you? And how he has empowered me is I became a public speaker for Lions Eye Bank and organ donation. So, but then I want to fight that constant, there's triggers all the time. Like when we pray for our children on Friday night and things like that.
I understand.
I don't want to be in that constant state. I mean, as a mom, it just never goes away. I don't want to be
But it can be packaged differently so it doesn't keep triggering, okay? Look, go back to King David. He lost a baby. And he prayed, and he prayed. What happened when the baby actually died? He got up and went right back to work and right back to life. Because it was no longer anything to do at that point. You have to somehow be reconciled to the loss and accept that and embrace it as that's the current reality, okay? And be focused on what we are doing now and going forward so that it doesn't keep leaking in, the past doesn't keep leaking into the present, all right? I mean, it's a horrendous thing that happened. I know your story, I know what happened, but it's not happening now. Nothing you could do now will affect or change what happened. So instead you can be joyful for those who have their children still around, who didn't go through the horrific thing that you went through with yours, okay? And killed in a tragic accident, okay? So that's just in case people are wondering. So, you know, she lost a child in a tragic accident. And the thing is, somehow we have to grow to that place where we have peace with that current reality so it doesn't distract from and hinder the current stuff that you're trying to do, because it will distract from it because it keeps you in the past, okay? So somehow you have to get to the place where you can have joy for others who have their children that you would love to have that you don't at the moment, but that you can have that joy anyway. And these are things that maybe counseling and therapy and stuff can help with. But yes, you are in a very weak place anytime you suffer any kind of tragedy or abuse or some sort of, we'll call it trauma. Any kind of major trauma will put you in a weaker place. The trick is, not so much the trick, the goal is to get healed from it and come out of it as quickly as possible, where it's a thing that happened, not a thing that's still happening, okay? I have counseled somebody that lost a child 15 or 20 years ago who still is there in that same spot and has never healed and calls here on a regular enough basis. And I'm not picking on them. I don't know what to do to help them. They've got to do it themselves. They have to want to let go of that pain and live in what's now, okay? Because I know since all of this, you and your husband have been able to be retired and go and travel and do some things. Just love those moments and live those moments and be joyful for other people with their children and do stuff with other children and just say, I'm glad these children are around and the parents get to do and whatever. And you know what? You had a lot of great moments with your son until that happened too. It's so hard. I don't want to minimize this. I've not had this happen in my life. I can't even imagine, okay? But somehow you have to not let it keep you in this suffering place so that you lose out on now, okay? Because you're missing all these moments now that could be so much more joy and shalom and everything else because the past keeps sucking you back into it, okay? And I don't have the full answers for it. If you and I counsel, maybe we can help dig out some of the things that are there. I think a lot of it has to do with accepting it is what it is, right? And it's hard to accept that, like, it shouldn't have happened. He should be here. All these things that go through our minds, but it did, and it's horrible, but it's not happening now anymore.
But I have to be strong for my daughter. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a daughter, so.
Then focus your attention
Yeah.
on your daughter.
Yeah.
Okay? And don't think anything you do with her diminishes how you feel about your son, even though he's not here. But that, embrace, because I know people that have suffered miserably because of a loss of a sibling and the parents could never get over it, so the parents never gave them the attention they needed because all they knew was how much the parent loved the one that died, okay? So if you focus on what's still here, focus on your husband, focus on your daughter, right? Focus on the other people and friends here, focus on the children here, and help at the m.t.o.i Pro, whatever it is. Get joy out of children and remember the joy you had from yours while you had it, right? But don't let that trauma from the past leak into the present, or you're still there and you can't enjoy now. You can't be the blessing you need to be and all the other things that you could be doing now because you're stuck in the thing that doesn't exist anymore. The past is gone, right? I know that when things like that first happen and people do have loss that's tragic, there is a grieving process that usually takes around 6 months to a year to go through. And so I'm not saying you need to just let things go like when it first happens, but if you're still dealing with this stuff 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 years later, something didn't get handled right, okay? There should be a way to work through so that the loss is a memory that you have, but is not affecting and derailing your ability to have now be what it needs to be, okay? And that's something that you should then seek help with if you can't get there by yourself. Have somebody who's professional to walk you through how to get there. Because you should be able to have some sad moments, but mostly have peace and joy of the memory. But if you're still kind of sad all the time and it's just always in your thoughts, you haven't healed that yet fully, okay? And you should probably get some help with that because it's normal to go through it for a period of time, but at some point, you have to have all of your attention on the living, okay? And I think Yeshua talks about that quite a bit, Now, he's gonna be in the kingdom or whatever, the millennium. You're gonna get your time to see him and how that's all gonna play out. So you should have that piece as well. You just don't get to see him now, okay? So focus on what you can now, and you'll get there, okay? All right.
No, thank you very much for that, Teresa, for being vulnerable enough to bring that up, because that is a very powerful imagery. I mean, we all deal with that to some degree, whether it's the traumas or the things we want that we can't have. Like, that just perfectly exclamation points everything you taught, and is very beautiful imagery.
And I want to let me just emphasize one more time. I am not picking on, judging, or criticizing anybody that's struggling. But if you're struggling, I think that you shouldn't be, which means that you should be able to get the help. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be like something's wrong with you. I'm saying you should have been able to get that into a different place in your memory so it's not leaking into every moment. So you need to get some help with that, okay? So I'm not blaming you or picking on you. I'm just saying is sometimes people need to have someone hold them by the hand and walk them through how to get past these things so that they still stay there in your memory, but they don't hurt the same way, okay? I mean, we do better when it's a parent and it's older, you know, and so, like my wife still has moments where she misses her mother, and now her father has passed, but when her mother first passed, but over the years, it didn't come up very often. Just something would remind her, she'd be sad for a minute. But generally speaking, she just had her memories, and she was able to get past it. We do that easier when we're dealing with, you know, older parents in their 80s, 90s, whatever, and we say, well, you know, they weren't gonna live forever anyway, right? But when it's a young teenager, young 20s, I forget how old your son was, you know, I mean, they're not supposed to die. So we don't handle that as well, right? So we have to find a way, though, to still get to that same place where we embrace the memories. We have some moments that might remind us of them and we might get sad, but generally it should not be interfering with our everyday life or coming up on a very frequent basis, right? Because there should be enough things now that have you in the now. Your daughter, your husband, other things, right? Okay? But that's not to say some of you may have a moment where you think, but if I don't do that all the time, I'll forget about him. No, you won't. You'll never forget about him. Maybe that's the fear. I can't let it go because I can't let that go. I can't let him go. But you're not gonna let him go. It's gonna be a wonderful memory of him, a sad memory of what happened, but it's never gonna go away. But it'll be in a safe place where it's not interfering with your functioning and your daily life, right? And that's what we want to get it to, where you're safely functioning in your daily life, okay? But don't have that fear. You won't forget him. Anybody loses anybody, you will not forget them, okay? You will always have them in there, hopefully in a good, warm space. Every now and then something will happen that reminds you of them, and you'll have a moment where you'll either smile or you'll cry a little bit. It'll just be a moment, and that's fine. I told you, my wife still cries every now and then about her father. He passed much more recently. Certainly about her mother, even though that was many years ago, just because something triggered it, something reminded her. And I hold her, she cries for 5 minutes, and then she's fine. And then life goes on. You know, I remind her of the good moments, that she remembers those good moments, you know, and it's good. So, you know, again, please don't think I'm picking on anybody. Tragedy is literally that, tragedy, right? Okay, it's just horrific. But somehow you have to live now, even though those things happened. And it's just, you have to, okay? And if you don't know how to do that, get the help. You know, I might be able to help. Janet certainly, you know, could help. There are people that we have that can help, right? All right, Sarah Beth, back to you.
Okay, so also to what Mr. Bohe said, it does very much remove the boogeyman, but I think that I've heard you talk about this, and I was like, I'm not very excited about this teaching, because I was like, well, I already know, like, he's not the one that, you know, he's not the one that caused this. But I think it's gone so deeper than I expected, which I don't know why. I should have expected you to take it someplace I'd never expected. But it reveals something way more dangerous than the boogeyman was ever portrayed to be. And I think that's just really, really beautiful. And I love, you know, what you just said, that it's not, the shouldn't be's, that we shouldn't be here, wherever the here is for us, isn't about being, you know, we're just weak, or we're just this, or we're just that. It's a hope that you're telling us there is something better. There is, if we put the work in, there is something better that we could live without all this pain. But then to my question.
Oh, wait, hold on, I just thought a thought, okay? When you say we're just weak, we're just strong, okay, I don't want you to make it so black and white that way. If I were to take two colors, right, that could mix together and still sort of maintain their colors. Whichever one I put more of, the thing I do should be more that color, right? So if I had to tell you to pick one color to describe the thing that has two in it, you'd pick the one that there's more of. So that's what when you say I am weak, well, yes, if you are spending more time in areas of weakness and acting and responding out of weakness, then yes, you are weak in terms of the balance. I'm not saying you're weak like totally, right? Some areas you are strong, but if there's more living in the weakness than in the strength, then yes, I would say if you had to pick one of the two to describe you, then maybe I would say you would describe yourself as weak, all right? But just realize that you're not gonna just be one or the other. There's gonna be a mixture, okay? And you still wanna work on strengthening anything that's weak, okay? But you may look at yourself and say, wow, I actually live more of my life in weakness than in strength. I need to do something about that. So if I had to pick one of the two to label myself, I might have to label it weak. But it's not a 100% zero sort of thing, right? One or the other. There's a mixture. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, okay? Like I said, if I put two things in something and one there was more of than the other, and I forced you to pick one or the other to describe it, you'd pick the one there's more of. It's the one that you see more of it, okay? Go ahead.
Okay, so to the question, somebody brought up we stone people that are trying to basically be in that adversary role of saying, hey, come serve this one instead. So I think there's two kinds of adversaries. There's a kind of adversary you need to immediately cut off, like the person that's trying to lead you away from the walk. But then there's the adversary that's we value to whatever degree that they're showing us the weaknesses we need to grow on. So how do you distinguish between the adversaries that are useful and you don't, the goal isn't just to get the adversary to leave us alone. The goal is to deal with what he's bringing up so he doesn't have anything to work with. But where's the difference between the one you're supposed to stone and the one that we should value?
Well, it should be, when you look at it from the same point of view, like when Peter said what he said, Yeshua told him, get behind me. Just like he told the enemy to go. In other words, if the person acting in the adversarial role is hindering you, that's the ones you need to cut off. If the one who's acting the adversarial role simply exposed something, you're like, oh, that's a weakness in me. All right, I might need to let that person hang around a little bit because maybe they'll bring out some more things I need to know about. It's just something you have to be cautious with how you handle that. But it has to do with what was exposed, okay? What got exposed with Peter is that Peter was afraid. Nothing got exposed in Yeshua, okay? So this is one of those things you have to shut down. By the way, that's why every personal development person out there that's of any success will tell you, you need to get all those satans out of your life. All those toxic people that don't believe in you, tell you you can't do it, tell you you're no good, tell you you'll never amount to anything. Those are all satans. Those people need to be cut out of your life. If you're not supporting and encouraging and there for me, what are you in my life for? Okay? All those negative Nellies who are out there trying to drag you down and tell you can't do it or whatever, cut them off. You know, almost every of the really top guys that I listen to, they all say, look, you probably need to cut out half the people you hang out with, half the people you spend time with, at least in your life. They're dragging you down, they're not helping. Wow. But if you think about it, that might be true. Okay? We spend way too much time with people that are not adding anything to the mix, they're only taking away. All right? And so those are satans. They're adversaries, not in a spiritual sense, but adversaries to if you're wanting to go somewhere and do something, and they're hindering, telling you can't do it, knocking you down, whatever, they're acting like a satan, as an adversary, as a stumbling block. Well, you'll never amount to anything. Well, that person's a satan. What are you trying to do that for? You don't know how to run a business. You don't know anything about that thing. You don't know how to do any kind of stuff like that. They're acting, not the Satan, it's the role. Okay? Those people need to be just cut out. Get behind me. Go away. I don't want to hear it. You want to talk like that? Go somewhere else. Go hide in the bushes and watch. I'm going to go do this thing. Okay? I'm going to make this thing happen. I don't need to hear you trying to tell me I can't do it. Okay? As a matter of fact, some of the best success stories out there are the people that thrive on tell me I can't do it. All right? Elder, right? You've heard those stories, right? There are people that they thrive on just tell me I can't do it. That's Not like can't do it like you shouldn't, but like not capable of. What are you doing? You know you don't know anything about that. Oh yeah, I'll show you. Don't tell me I can't do it. All right? But some of you are quick to tell yourselves you can't do it. Well, I can't do it. I don't know. We get calls like that every day. Well, I don't know what to do, and I can't do this. Well, you haven't done it up to this point. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Go out there and figure it out. You know? But I want you to tell me what to do. I just did. Figure it out. I told you what to do. That is an actual activity. Figuring it out is an activity. Tell me what to do. Doing the figuring out. That's a doing. Okay? But you figure it out. Go find the resources, the people, the information, and go try and fail a little bit here, make mistakes over there a little bit, learn from that. Go do it. Figure it out. You know? I tell the story all the time. When Steve and my son was building these Lego robot things, and he would ask me for help at some point, I would be doing something on my laptop in the living room while he was doing that, hanging out watching him, and I'd say, in a minute would turn into an hour, he'd already finished the thing. Then I'd go, do you need any help? He said, nope, figured it out. First time was accidental. I just was busy and I got distracted, didn't help him. After that, I just purposely didn't help him. I just told him, I'll be there in a minute or whatever, and left him alone, knowing he'd figure it out. About the third time, I said, last 2 times you figured it out, just figure it out, you can do it. I encouraged him, I said, you can do it, you did it the last 2 times, figure it out. You know? And now he's on a job with what he does, HVAC, half the time he goes to look at a machine, he has no idea what's going on, he has to figure it out. All the time I'm on the phone with him, I say, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to figure this thing out. Something's not working, it doesn't make any sense. He's got to figure it out. That's probably the number 1 skill you need in life, is learning how to figure things out. Right? But recognizing it's your job to figure it out, not somebody else's job. Now you can go ask somebody that might know. Okay? So the thing's making this noise and this is happening on this gauge, you know, and he's talking to somebody on the phone, and what do you think that is? Okay? But he had to figure out who to call that might know the answer to do whatever, right? Figure it out.
From Shakara Arnold, I always assumed once you pass a test, you're good. How do you make sure you don't open the door again?
There's a difference between passing a test and not having anything to work with. Like if HaSatan would have tried to tempt me with somebody, I've sat in rooms, some of you have done the same thing. You know, I was in college, joints were being passed all over the place. They were handed to me often, and I just handed it to the next person. Yes, I had those experiences. I never bothered to think one temptation that I wanted to try it. It was happening all around me. So somebody next to me would hand me to hand to the next person, and so I just did like this. Okay? And so that's not a test I passed. I didn't have any interest. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if it's a test, it means there was interest. And if you pass the test, that's like saying, when you get up and say, I'm an alcoholic at AA, right? You go to an AA meeting, you have to say, hi, my name is, and I'm an alcoholic. It doesn't matter you hadn't had a drink in 20 years. You say, I'm an alcoholic. Because you pass the test every day. Because the temptation doesn't ever go away. You have to keep passing the test. So when you say, I passed the test, I should be good. That only works if you're no longer tempted. If the temptation has gone, okay? But if the temptation is there, but you're just able to say no to it, that's gonna get poked at every now and then by Satan to see if you still have it under control, okay? So how do you make sure you don't open the door again? Just like an alcoholic, recognize that every day you have to win the battle every day. Every day you have to win the battle every day. If you have a temptation, you have to be on guard for that temptation, even though you've got it handled, okay? I mean, I know people that told me they've gone to AA meetings and people stand up who've been clean for 10, 15 or more years, whatever, but they still go to meetings, they still stand up, and they still describe themselves as having the temptation, okay? And they have to win that every day, you know? You know, my mother told me she stopped smoking in the 60s. She told me, I don't know how many years ago, she said, you know what? I know that only 1 cigarette, I'd be right back smoking. So, you know, I know, she said it to me, it would take 1 cigarette, I'd probably choke to death and then I'd be smoking again, okay? So she had to make a choice every day, I'm not smoking, right? Okay, now I don't know how tempted she's ever been after that, but she actually admitted that it's still in there. I mean, she still has that memory and that thought, because she said she knows it'll only take one. With all of you, if it's a test that you passed because there was a problem, it only takes one. You only have to give in to it once. Okay? So, no. Okay? You're not good. She said, I always assume once you pass the test, you're good. No. Only if you pass it again today, then you're good today. And if you pass it again tomorrow, then you're good tomorrow. But you're going to have to keep passing that test. Unless you legitimately, and I've had people tell me that whatever it was that used to tempt them is just gone. Okay, that could happen. You really have it gone. Well, then if it's gone, then you are good. That door, you can swing the doors open as can be. All right? I had joints in my hand. I could have done puff, puff, pass like everybody else. Right? But I had no thought, no interest. So there was no temptation. You understand? But if I had been a pot smoker at some point, every time it got handed to me, that had been a test. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't even have been in the room with it while they were passing it, because it would have been a test. Do you understand? So there was no door to open. The door was as wide as it could have been. The thing was in my hand. It's like being an alcoholic and showing up at a place with an open bar. The door's open. What do you do with it? You decide whether you're going to respond or not. You're in a place of availability, okay? But if you're not tempted, if you don't have that interest, it doesn't matter how freely available something is, okay? But if you know you have a weakness for something, whatever the something is, then you must win that battle hourly, daily, hourly, minute, whatever, how often it pops up. You have to win that battle over and over every single day. All right? It doesn't ever go away. That's what people tell me. I know there's things in my life that never go away, things that are my weaker areas, and they don't go away. I have to win those battles every day. Well, maybe not. Maybe sometimes it doesn't come up for a week. Maybe it comes up multiple times in one day. Whatever it is, right? Sometimes you can go a while, nothing pops up, and you think, oh, I'm good, and all of a sudden, boom, it pops up. You're like, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
From Olivia Dirth, not dealing with things we quote unquote should, is there a shifting or giving authority for our emotions to drive, which makes us vulnerable to his snares or schemes, which makes us quote unquote unguarded?
Okay, I don't know how I would have worded it, or maybe a little different. Let me just put it this way. Anytime your emotions drive instead of your intellect, you're more likely to have a problem, okay? I'm not saying emotions driving causes every problem. I'm just in that way. I'm just saying just because you have your emotions driving, you're always going to be in a problem. But when you say not dealing with things that you should, or shifting or giving authority, etc., if you're letting the emotions have the authority, I want. That's what David gave into. I want her. Okay? The mind was not saying, but you can't. She's somebody else's. Right? He was like, I want her. So he made and gave in to the schemes and was basically unguarded, okay? This guards, the mind guards, okay? So we don't, so the answer, Olivia, is yes, basically, okay?
From Christina, how did the disciples know about Yeshua's temptations if they had not met yet? Is this something he told them about?
Okay, we don't know what we don't know. Since it's written, then we know that somebody must have known and somebody must have talked about it. Okay? Look, there's a bunch of stuff that Shaul says, Paul says about Yeshua's life that he wasn't there for. Somebody told him. Now he says he was also trained by Yeshua privately, so who knows? But I'm just saying is there's information that was passed down by eyewitnesses that other people then would have known about. Okay? Look, Moses is writing about stuff all the way to Genesis, right? Because he wrote the 5 books. He wasn't there for any of those conversations, like Melchizedek and Avram and whatever else he put in there, okay? Right? Moses is the one writing all this. That's what we're told. So information was shared, passed down generationally, whatever it was, okay? So yes, my answer is the disciples would have known about things because that would have been shared with them by somebody. Okay? Remember, some of them were with John, so some of the things that happened when they were with John, they would have known. Now, as far as him being in the desert and what happened in the desert, he might have come back and told them, this is what happened in the desert, so that it would be written down. okay? But they weren't there. Yes, they weren't there.
All right, another one from Olivia. Dealing with our stuff, is it like working out or building muscle like you were talking about, the tearing of muscle that grows, the tearing at these weak areas, the emotions get stronger?
I would say everything except the last part, okay? All of that is true as you tear at anything or develop anything by working hard at it and stretching it and making it go beyond what its limits are at the moment, you grow. I wouldn't say that it's the emotions that get stronger. You get stronger, okay? The only thing I would change is take the word emotions out of there, okay? So you get stronger, okay, through that process.
Another one from Shikara. Is there any way to figure out what we may not have listened to that is causing us to not move forward?
It's not about figuring out those things. It's a matter of specifically figuring out, I'm here and I want to be here. And then figuring out why I'm not here. Why am I not in this place I want to be? What am I not doing? What am I not thinking? Maybe my thinking is wrong because my thinking has me here and not here. My actions have me here and not here. My beliefs have me here and not here. You know what I'm saying? It's a big package of things. So that's what we cover when I do one-on-one counseling. A lot of times I go, okay, well, where do you want to go? Okay, and you're over here now. What do you think is holding you back? What are you missing? Are you thinking wrong? Do you have a lack of information that you need? Are your emotions out of whack and causing you? Where are the Satans blocking you? I'm going to use that from now on, okay? Where are those roadblocks that are in the way? It could be your thoughts, okay? So when he says, is there a way to figure out what we may not have listened to? Yes. Figure out what it is that if you had listened to it, you'd be where you need to be. And so those are the things you may not have listened to that you should have. It also may be stuff that you never listened to, you never heard, and that you now need to go get. Stuff that you're just missing in general. You never had it, it never came up. All right, so thank you everyone. Hope that was good.